Hello.
Hi.
Put my mask on here.
Authentic hello.
This is as real as it gets. Hey, the beauty of these masks is now we can just say whatever we want and you can just dub it all in. It's light. So how many times have you flown it so far?
3 batteries.
3 packs, yeah. So have you done like vertical, like it takes off vertically, I'm assuming, like
It takes off like a Mavic. It position holds, who cares? You just let it sit there and you can adjust your goggles and scratch your balls and
That's amazing. So if you let go of everything, it holds.
There's 3 modes. N mode, normal, I think they call it, but which is angle mode with position hold. Then there's sport mode, which is the same thing, just faster with no obstacle avoidance.
Oh, we got some benches over there that we could take off from.
Here we are with Christoph Benfrey from Low Key Studios and maybe someday YouTube. And he gets first crack before most people in the world on checking out the brand new DJI FPV drone.
Big reveal.
Da, 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 da.
Oh wow, it's smaller than I would have thought. I thought it was gonna be. Okay, interesting. Only one camera. I mean, I guess there's the obstacle avoidance cameras there.
Yeah.
Wow, it's so interesting. Yeah. Wow. So yeah, that's the majority of the weight.
Yeah.
As you would expect. Huh. It does seem lighter. And it's nice that when you plug it in, it doesn't just turn on. It's not as. I mean, maybe I just have to get used to it, but it doesn't like lock into your hands the same way that a bigger one does. Like maybe it's just my dinky hands, but
yeah,
I think I'd get used to it. I do wish it was a little thinner here.
Yeah.
So the goggles have their own battery?
Yeah, they have their own pack now. This will work on the old goggles too, obviously.
Oh, cool. Oh man, I'm actually genuinely nervous right now. Like yeah, weird. Like I'd feel more comfortable flying a fully manual.
Absolutely, it was same with me. I felt exactly
like it was like a big open field of grass.
Yeah,
me too. Safely landed and not snow and like a narrow little.
I don't know. Why don't you just line of sight it in noob mode?
Sure, in noob mode. Oh man, that's okay. So then it's just like flying a Mavic.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So just line of sight it in noob mode.
This is power.
Yeah. Oh, I love this.
I don't like that at all.
Wow.
Okay. Oh, that was nerve-wracking. Just like a Mavic.
Yeah, a little quicker.
Yeah. A little country. Not as stable though, maybe.
Yeah, and of course you've got the right stick isn't in the proper mode.
Right, yeah.
So, you know, just kind of, you got to center it manually.
Yeah. Which is fine, I'm kind of used to that.
Yeah.
Okay, switch to manual mode.
There you go.
Okay, now we're talking. Here's something open. Let's see. Oh yeah, the prop wash is crazy.
Yeah. So, what do you think PJ's gonna think?
PJ's gonna hate this.
Yeah.
There's no need for PJ to ever touch this.
No.
And this isn't for PJ.
No.
This is like, I don't know who this is for, man.
Like I said, for us it could be if the camera's good.
Yeah.
That's all that matters. I mean, then I would take it for that shot where you lost your whole drone and GoPro and everything.
Yeah.
Because it has returned
like
to home.
A dive, maybe. I don't like seeing the voltage too, like not seeing the voltage.
Yeah.
Because I like knowing when if I'm like
really sagging
up,
the battery.
If it's sagging it. So that would be something I would want to see. And you're right. The physics are a little different.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see this footage because it feels like it's gonna be there's gonna be some like jello happening. I'm seeing the props in the shot too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you'll have to adjust your camera angle a little bit to get them out of the shot.
Right. It seems like the angle actually seems pretty good. It's like a nice wide field of view. Yeah. And I can go pretty fast.
150, I think.
You know, you wouldn't want to be chasing a car like this, but for like freestyle acro stuff, the angle actually seems okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm starting to get a little more comfortable. I think at first you're just like, I don't want to crash this thing because of how much of a pain in the ass it would be to fix it.
Yeah.
But like, it's kind of like when I fly an Inspire and I'm like, I'm not doing the same kinds of shots that you would do with a Mavic, because if you crash a Mavic, you know, it's not as nerve-wracking. 400 meters, okay. I'm not gonna, I mean, it's crystal clear still. And I mean, I'm pretty high up, but
Yeah.
if I go a little lower, I just don't want to put it down here because it's like on the other side of a fence.
Yeah.
But yeah, easily 450 meters probably.
And not
And
not even
and no breakout
dropping down.
whatsoever, and it's behind me. Okay. Yeah, you know what? I can see the value in this. Okay, I'm hitting stop,
And then boom,
normal mode, and then we're
just hold the normal mode button.
RTH in progress. So now I can take these off.
Yeah.
And theoretically fly, like, can I manually land it?
Yeah, just flip it back into
normal?
into normal mode.
You hand catch it?
Yeah, probably. The downward obstacle sensors probably aren't going to be a...
Flying wise, it's a little, it's different from like a rock solid carbon fiber frame, you know, with more powerful, like more aggressive props.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem as stable, but I had to see the footage.
Yeah.
Because like, as a camera person, like, that's where I would use this over a 5-inch. Is like, if you want something better than a GoPro.
Yeah.
Like, what does this look like compared to a GoPro? So yeah.
Or the safety features.
Safety
a
features
shot you can't get because there's people around or whatever there is, and you can have the confidence that it's got return to home. That it's
yeah, I would have, like, you know, that would have saved me right there on one job alone where I lost the drone because it went down and I had no way of finding it. So yeah, but yeah, curious to see the footage.
All right, well, that's a good intro. What do people generally pay you to do?
Well, yeah, I'm a cinematographer, so I'm really good at pretending to be good at using cameras to make stuff, basically. And sometimes I use drones to do that. It's like the most fun way of using cameras to make stuff, in my opinion. So,
And so when did you start flying FPV?
It's been just over a year now. But I got really interested in it, especially during like the lockdown that we had last year in 2020. I spent like dozens and dozens of hours in the simulator, maybe over 100 hours. I think actually it was like 150 hours between the simulator and like just going out and flying by myself, and all the parks were like empty, and so I had a lot of spare time to kind of, you know, learn really quickly. And I also had a lot of good mentors along the way, such as yourself. So, so that helped a lot too, because I have friends who kind of all jumped into it around the same time, but they just, you know, they didn't have other people to fly with. And I think having experienced people to fly with really fast-tracked my development in the FPV world. So, and I'm obsessed with it.
Would you say your first reason to get in, or at least your biggest excuse reason, was for the actual cinematography angle?
Yeah, definitely wasn't expecting to get into like freestyle stuff. I kind of, like a lot of people like me, saw like Johnny FPV stuff, and that was kind of my gateway into it. And then now that I've like more immersed in it, there's a lot more people whose work I look up to, but it was just kind of like, you know, slightly more interesting than Mavic footage. Being able to kind of like fly through tight places and just having a lot more control over the drone was what really pulled me in. And but I never expected to get into freestyle, but like now I enjoy freestyle as much or more than the cinematic stuff. So yeah, it's just too much fun.
So when you first heard about DJI then bringing out an FPV drone, what were you hoping for?
I wasn't sure what to expect. I think I kind of like, as I know that they own iFlight now. I actually like ordered some stuff for my Inspire, and it just showed up and it said like it was coming from iFlight, even though it was like Inspire propellers.
Right.
So I think before I saw any of the leaked photos or anything, I just thought it was going to be kind of like a carbon fiber frame, but maybe like, you know, a little bit more sealed, so it was like weather sealed and stuff like that. I wasn't expecting it to look at like what it looked like and be like, plastic. I was hoping for improved battery.
Yeah.
A lot of the things that they did, I kind of expected. So like, having a voltage, battery percentage instead of a voltage readout, like things that make it more approachable for people who aren't, who haven't done it before. Cause there's a lot of stuff you have to learn, like charging batteries. I figured they would simplify that, and they did.
Yeah.
So, but,
Yeah, and
and
you started with DJI air
Yeah.
units and digital gear, so you didn't even go through the pain of analog of everything. All the receivers had to be hooked up separately, and all the
yeah.
transmitters had to be hooked up separately, and trying to get the display in your goggles to do anything by programming.
And
with
even
light
for the stuff
control.
that is still kind of finicky, like now you can just look up a YouTube video and you'll find, somebody who's already problem solved that. So
Yeah,
it's a lot more simple than it was like 3 or 4 years ago, for sure.
yeah. And when we were flying it, you didn't see, and I'm not sure the other time that you flew it, and that you flew it, if you saw the output from the goggles to a smartphone.
No, we tried to connect it
so-
to the smart controller,
Yeah,
and it didn't recognize it, so we just
no,
gave up.
it's a special version of DJI Fly app, the one that you use for
okay.
the Mavic Mini and the Mavic Air.
Gotcha.
So yeah, so it only works with that, and it detects it as a Mavic Air too. And you can get into the menu, and you can, this is the only thing that I was going to say that is interesting, is it seems like you have control over, you can put the camera from auto to manual, but then none of the other features work. Like I can't tap on the ISO or anything or change anything, but it
Right.
definitely suddenly goes dark, like it kicks the ISO
okay.
into a different. So that
Maybe
might be a
that-
feature that they unlock.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the image.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
kind
So
of like, the thing that I was
So-
like the most curious about, because
you have
I mean-
seen it in 4K 60 frames a second, like it's high, it's default highest bit rate and
Yeah.
everything. So I know there's a few other modes which we can talk about. And I don't know if you downloaded that other footage. I shot it sort of early
Yeah, I
morning.
got that
So,
one.
yeah.
Like, so the good things, I would say, like the dynamic range looks pretty good for, an action camera. I would say it's pretty similar to like a Phantom 4 that can do 4K 60. I would say the Mavic too, but the Mavic doesn't do 4K 60. But like in terms of like a still from the image, it looks about as good as a Mavic image. So that's kind of what I was hoping for and what I expected in terms of like the dynamic range. I think like the range of the drone, like the feed was really good. Like we kind of flew it. The other time I flew it too, we flew it a lot further than I would have ever gone with an FPV drone. And I was even flying like my regular drone, and my friend was flying the new one, and he was able to go a lot further than I was. And when I was using the 50 megabit per second on my, my 5-inch freestyle drone, and his was like crystal clear, and mine was getting pretty muddy, so I had to turn around. I would say also like the sharpness of like when I'm looking at the stuff that you sent me, it looks good. Like it's not like overly sharpened, but it's not like soft either. It's kind of like right in that range that it should be in. So those are like the good things. It's like a good looking picture when you like freeze frame it. The downside, there are a couple downsides, I think. The obvious one is that the props are in the shot, at least in some of the clips.
Almost all of it.
Yeah, which is, and I've heard there's like a mode where you can get that, but it's obviously going to be cropping it in a little bit. And like, I still, for this kind of footage, I like it to be as wide as possible. So that was kind of interesting that, you can see the props in the shot. I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah. The 4x3, the 4x3 is the full frame. The 16:9 is just a cropped 4x3.
Right. So the 4x3 would still have the props in it then, I guess.
Yeah.
It's just taller.
Yeah.
The frames per second, like I'm surprised because I expect, or I imagine that they're gearing this towards people who want to get it into this specifically for cinematic stuff. And the fact that it doesn't do 24 frames per second with like a slower shutter is like a red flag for me. Like I usually shoot at 24p because you're not
Mhm.
really slowing this footage down. Like you're going fast and you want it to look fast. So you're not,
Mhm.
maybe if you're doing like a mountain biker or something like that, you'd want to slow it down. But generally, you want to shoot it at the frames per second that you're viewing it at, and
Yeah.
the fact
If
that
the
it doesn't do
flight is
24.
if it's not about a subject, if it's about the flying, then
Mhm.
24 is what you want.
Yeah. So and also the fact that you can't slow the shutter down.
Yeah.
And then I mean, like the root of that problem is that the camera that it's filming with is the camera you're using for FPV.
Yeah.
So it's not even like you would want it to be a slower frames per second, because it's going to be hard to fly it if it's, you're getting motion blur and stuff. Like the advantage of regular FPV drones is you have your FPV camera, which is, so that you can pilot it, and then you have your filming camera, which you can dial in the settings to be as cinematic as possible. And the two are like the settings that you would do for
Right.
those two are pretty different. So it's interesting that
Yeah,
they,
especially as you get into the nighttime and into
yeah,
darker stuff. Like I have my FPV camera just set super bright so I can see everything, and
yeah.
I wouldn't want my action camera set anywhere near that.
No, you would usually expose for the sky. So which means like,
Yeah.
the sky is perfectly exposed, and then the ground and stuff, it might be a little bit underexposed, but that's kind of the cinematic look. But you
Yeah.
can't fly like that if you can't
No.
see where you're going. So
Yeah.
so yeah, that's interesting. The stabilization, it's really good, because I remember when I was
Yeah.
flying, it felt like it was going to be a lot more shaky. Like it almost
Mhm.
felt like flying maybe not like a drone that needed to be tuned better, but just like a drone that I wasn't used to the tuning. So it was a
Yeah.
lot more jumpy than I wanted it to be. And the stabilization got a lot of that out of it, but it still doesn't have that like magic that Real Steady has,
Yeah.
where it like really
Or
smooths out,
even hyper smooth.
or even hyper smooth. Yeah, but
Yeah.
for me, like I never really use any of the in-camera stabilization options, because Real Steady just does such an incredible job.
Yeah. Sometimes when I'm doing just a Cinewhoop thing,
Mhm.
I sometimes put the hyper smooth on.
Yeah,
If I know it's just like I just have this one chance to do this shot and I'm going to use my phone for it, I'm not going to have time to do
yeah.
the Real Steady thing. Yeah, it comes out really nice. But
But if you're
yeah,
doing like
I
really
totally.
dynamic stuff, I think, like, because you're always making micro
Yeah.
adjustments. So like even if you're an amazing
Yeah.
pilot, like, you still have to kind of like, you'll see something last minute and you got to avoid it. So you're,
Yeah.
and Real Steady does a good job of getting rid of that stuff. And I know some people think it's cheating to use it, but I think if it's cinematic, it's like you're allowed to use Real Steady. Like that's the whole point.
Cheating.
So yeah. And the
Yeah.
fact also that the exposure, like on that note, that the exposure isn't locked, also means
Yeah.
it's kind of, it's unpredictable. So for cinematic stuff, you'd want it to be set, and not like adjusting as you're going into bright and dark spaces. So that's kind
Right.
of
So
problematic.
So I did discover something else about the camera too. When you go into the settings, if you know how we're used to the low latency mode most of the
Mhm.
time on the FPV camera, I never set it for high quality because I don't like that extra latency,
Yeah.
and I'm not keeping the footage from my FPV camera.
Yeah, for sure.
So on this one, if you want the low latency mode, it won't do 4K. It'll only do 1080p.
Hmm.
So immediately when I kicked it down into that low latency mode, it just felt better to fly.
Yeah.
But now you're limited to 1080p.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's
1080
interesting that they went with one camera. Like I thought they were gonna incorporate like the Osmo action into it somehow,
Yeah.
and then have the FPV camera be like what the FPV camera is. Like the gimbal is
Yeah.
kind of cool. It got me actually. So when I was flying it with another friend of mine, I was
Yeah.
like adjusting the gimbal while I was flying, and it really messed me up. Like
Yeah. Oh
you
yeah.
know,
That
it was
that
just like,
hurts.
yeah, I just had to set it and forget it. Like I
Yeah.
almost crashed it as a result,
Yeah.
basically. Like so, and it's a cool
Even in like
feature.
the self-leveling mode,
Yeah,
I was adjusting the gimbal and it made me really confused.
yeah. There was I did a waterfall dive
Mm.
when I flew it, and I actually thought, because I remember we were talking when we were out in the field, how it's like the gravity almost feels like in the simulator, how it's like
Yeah.
they're slowing it down a little bit somehow. And I actually really liked, like I didn't feel like I had to like throttle up as hard when I got to the bottom of the waterfall. Like it kind of
Okay.
came out of the dive a lot smoother. But then when I was like, coming up to get over the trees, it felt like the camera wasn't tilted up enough to
Right.
like, because when you're flying, like when I'm flying it, I try to imagine it's like a plane, like handling like an airplane. So it's always
Yeah.
pointing where it's going. Like I don't like to go straight up because planes can't do
Yeah.
that and it doesn't feel natural. So, and when I was coming back up over the trees, like the camera was still kind of level, even though I was like throttling up, and it
Right.
just made it feel not as, I don't know, not as cinematic for some reason, because
Yeah.
it was like it was rising in an unnatural way.
Right. Or in a drone kind of way.
Yeah,
Not
in a drone kind of
not a
way
plane.
versus like a plane or a bird or whatever.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, so I mean, I think it's still usable. It's obviously like, it's like a beta version of it. So I'm sure there's things that hopefully they watch these videos and they tweak, based on people's feedback that they're getting. Because I think a lot of it could be fixed with like firmware updates and stuff like that. And also this is like their first go at it. Like I'm sure they'll the second version of the FPV drone will like take a lot of these into consideration. And
well, I think that if they did something where they spent a little less time making this camera fancy, like 4K, and just put a little couch on the top for an action camera of some sort, then you can strap your own camera on board.
Yeah.
I mean, I took it for a flight today, flew pretty hard for half the flight, and I got 13 minutes out of it, and that was right down to emergency landing. Like,
oh yeah,
it was like 2% at the end. Yeah, in the cold and everything. So I wanted to test everything. I did a dive just into the ground and hit the emergency brake, and it stopped. Looney Tunes rocket ship hitting the ground, just breaking right before it was kind of crazy. And then I did it heading towards like an obstacle as well, and in manual mode, like just flying straight towards it, and then just hit the brakes, and it stops incredibly fast. So it gives you a lot of confidence in your flying.
Yeah, and I think that's like a good thing for the people who should be buying this, or people who like have never really just been too intimidated to get into FPV stuff originally, and this kind of like took away all of the variables and the things that you don't understand, and made it like relatively easy. And I think what's cool is that it'll get people into it, and if it's anything like me, they'll become obsessed with it and and just like dive headfirst in. So I think it's going to bring a lot of new people into the hobby. I think it is a good drone for beginners.
And okay, so then as a filmmaker, where do you think you could actually use it in a professional setting?
Honestly, in its current state, I don't think I would use this over a 5-inch or a 7-inch drone, just because of the lack of control you have over the exposure and stuff. Like the footage we shot during the day with like in that field, it looks good, but it's like it's not cinematic. So it's that like the shutter speed's too quick. It gives it that kind of like cheap camera look. Yeah, so personally, like as somebody who already knows how to fly freestyle drones or quads, I don't think I would incorporate this in its current state into my workflow. But I do think if somebody is just getting started, they don't own any FPV drones, but they do kind of fly Mavics and Phantoms and stuff like that, it's like a good drone, if as like a stepping stone get into FPV. But yeah, personally, I don't think I would fly this thing for professional stuff.
Even in the scenario where you got to fly way out somewhere really sketchy, you'd still take the chance with your GoPro and your 7-inch.
Because unfortunately, like it's the flying experience with it is excellent, but the quality of the footage suffers too much for me. But
what about the content creator? Is that like that kind of professional? Do you think they could get something out of this?
Somebody like Casey Neistat, who doesn't care what the image looks like, he just cares about getting the shot. Perfect for that.
Right.
Like cinematography is not. He's more of a visual storyteller, and he doesn't care. Like he just needs it to be documented in some way. So I think somebody who kind of has that approach to him, where it's just like get the shot no matter what, it's good for
Mhm.
that kind of stuff. And there are a lot of
Right.
people, for this, like, but I'm a cinematographer first, so
Yeah.
it's like the image quality and like how it looks is like the more important than the flying experience for me. So
Yeah.
um, yeah. So for me, I probably won't incorporate it into my workflow anytime soon, but I think there is a
Yeah.
lot of people that would benefit from it. So
Cool. Well, thanks a
Yeah.
lot.
yeah, no problem. Hope that wasn't too rambly.